A long road stretched before him, and on that morning, everything was about to change. Jesus walked with his disciples, Peter full of questions, John full of wonder. He knew exactly where he was going, and he knew exactly why. He stopped on the road near the village of Bethphage and turned to two of his disciples. "Go into the village ahead," he said. "You will find a donkey tied there, one no one has ever ridden. Untie it and bring it to me." The two disciples looked at each other for a moment, then trusted and went. They found the donkey exactly where Jesus said it would be, but as they began to untie it, someone noticed. "Why are you untying that donkey?" the owner demanded. Peter answered simply, "The Lord needs it." Something in those words settled into his heart. He nodded and let them take it. They placed their cloaks on the donkey's back, not a throne, not a war horse, just a humble donkey, and they brought it back to Jesus. When Jesus laid his hand on that donkey, the animal was still, perfectly still. Even creation knew who he was. Peter helped him up, and the King of Kings rode on. And so began the most remarkable procession the world had ever seen. His disciples walked with him, 12 men who had seen miracles, yet still couldn't fully grasp what this day would mean. He had walked this earth healing the sick, feeding thousands, raising the dead, and now he rode toward the city that would reject him. A small group on a dusty road, but heaven was watching every single step. Peter could hardly contain himself. Something big was coming, he could feel it. The road to Jerusalem was never just a road. For Jesus, every step was purpose. The disciples buzzed with energy. Something in the air felt different today. Jerusalem appeared on the horizon, and with it, the noise began. The crowd had been waiting, and the moment they saw him, they erupted. Children waved palm branches with everything they had, arms wide, faces shining. Old women who had prayed for the Messiah their whole lives, they wept. Their prayers had walked right past them. "Hosanna," they cried. "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." Some laid their cloaks on the road, a carpet for a king who needed nothing, yet deserved everything. Beneath the hooves of a humble donkey, the king walked on the offerings of his people. He looked at the people, really looked at them, and his heart was full. People tore branches from the palm trees, something beautiful to wave for someone even more beautiful. The disciples walked alongside, hearts pounding. They had never seen anything like this. The road to the city was alive, covered in cloaks and branches, ringing with voices. A little girl stared up at him, too young to understand theology, but old enough to feel that something holy was passing by. He saw them, not as a crowd, but as every single person, every name, every need. "Hosanna in the highest!" The sound rose like thunder through the streets of Jerusalem. Not everyone was celebrating. From the edges of the crowd, the Pharisees watched, and they were not pleased. A Pharisee pushed to the front. "Teacher, rebuke your disciples. Tell them to be quiet." Jesus looked at him, calm, certain, and said, "I tell you, if they keep quiet, the very stones will cry out." The Pharisees had no answer for that. They turned away, furious and powerless. From above, it must have looked like a river of praise flowing toward the holy city. The very old and the very young stood side by side, and they both understood in their own way that this was holy. They weren't just waving branches, they were laying a royal carpet for a king who came in peace. He rode over their offerings, not to receive honor, but to carry the weight of their salvation. Even steady, stoic Peter couldn't hold it in. He lifted his hands and praised. John was quieter in his praise, but no less undone by it. They sang the ancient words, words written centuries before this day, written for exactly this moment. A king on a throne of gold could not have been more glorious than this, a servant king riding a donkey into history. The children were the loudest of all. Their praise was the most unguarded, the most honest. Jesus smiled at the children. He always did. The Pharisees watched from the shadows, unable to stop the praise, unable to ignore it. The gates of Jerusalem stood open. The king was almost home. Then something shifted in his eyes. The joy around him had not changed, but he saw something no one else could see. He wept, not for himself, but for Jerusalem, for what they could not yet see. If only you had known on this day what would bring you peace, but now it is hidden from your eyes. And through the gates of Jerusalem, the king entered his city. The whole city was stirred up. People poured out of their homes asking, "Who is this? Who is this?" people asked. The answer came from the crowd surrounding him. "This is Jesus, the prophet from Nazareth of Galilee." The name rippled through the streets like water. The streets of Jerusalem had seen kings before, but never quite like this. Even those on the rooftops were drawn, leaning over, desperate to see him. He didn't rush. He let the people see him, and he saw each one of them. At the edge of the road sat a blind man, arms reaching towards something he could feel but not yet see. In a sycamore tree, a tax collector named Zacchaeus had climbed for the same reason, just to see him. Jesus spoke quietly to Peter as they moved, instructions, details only he could know. Ahead of them, the temple gleamed, white stone and gold in the morning sun, the house of his Father. The city had never seen a day like this. Every street, every wall, every rooftop full. The temple was his destination, the house of prayer, his Father's house. Some in that crowd weren't just celebrating, they were worshiping, and they knew the difference. Every step closer to the temple was a step deeper into the weight of his purpose. The Pharisee watched. He was already planning, already calculating. Strangers grabbed Peter's arm. Who is he? What has he done? Peter could have talked for hours. John stood in the middle of the noise and found the stillness inside it, worship deeper than any shout. The whole city moved with him, a river of praise flowing through ancient streets. She stood on a stone just to see him a little better. She had to see him. And then the temple, the house of God, rising above everything. He dismounted, quietly, deliberately, as if each action was chosen with holy intention. He paused with the donkey for a moment, a small, unnoticed moment between a king and the creature he had chosen. Peter stood with the donkey. Even the donkey had played its part in history today. He walked up to the temple, the Son walking into his Father's house. The crowd fell into a hush as he climbed. Even celebration has a moment it must bow. He stood at the entrance of his Father's house, and everything inside him knew it was time. And inside the temple, he found something that broke his heart and stirred his righteous fury. "My house shall be called a house of prayer," he declared, "but you have made it a den of thieves." They fled, not from a sword, but from the authority of a voice that needed none. The courts of God's house fell silent, the way it always should have been. Then the broken came, the blind, the lame, the sick. They found him in the temple courts. He touched them one by one, and one by one they were made whole. For the first time in years, he saw light, and the first thing he saw was Jesus. A woman who hadn't stood straight in years stood, and she laughed through her tears. The witnesses couldn't contain it. They had never seen anything like this in the temple in their entire lives. And the children were still singing, "Hosanna to the Son of David." "Do you hear what these children are saying?" the Pharisee demanded, as if praise could be a crime. Jesus answered, "Yes. Have you never read, 'From the lips of children and infants you have ordained praise'?" He had no answer. The most educated man in the room was silenced by the truth. He sat down and he taught them. Whoever came, he spoke to, all day. He spoke with an authority that no school had given him and no man could take away. Some in that crowd weren't just hearing words, they were hearing, for the very first time, the truth. His disciples sat and listened too. They were still learning, always learning. In a corner of the temple, the plotting had already begun. They couldn't argue with his teaching, so they'd try another way. As evening fell, he stayed. He was never in a hurry when it came to his Father's house. When the day was done, he left the city, but he would return. The streets that had roared with hosannas now held only the echo of the day. Peter looked back at the city one more time. Something about this day, he'd carry it forever. John walked in silence. He would later write down this day, every word, every miracle, every tear. He stood on the hillside and looked back at Jerusalem in the fading light, the city he loved, the city that did not yet know how much. That night they rested outside the city, under the same stars that had hung over Bethlehem when he was born. Peter talked because he always had to process it out loud. John listened because some things needed silence to be understood. The donkey rested too, unknowing of what it had carried. the weight of the world's hope riding gently on its back. When the disciples slept, he prayed. He always prayed. This was where his strength came from. He prayed with tears he didn't wipe away. He was carrying something no one else could carry. That night, a little girl fell asleep still holding her palm branch. She didn't want to let go of the day. An old woman who had waited her whole life prayed again that night, but this time differently. This time, she had seen him with her own eyes. In another room, the night looked different. The Pharisees were meeting, planning, afraid of what they couldn't control. As the first light crept across the sky, he was still there, still praying. He stood up, a new day, the same mission, the same love. The disciples woke to a morning that didn't yet know what the days ahead would bring. Peter saw him already standing, already ready, and Peter, for once, had no words. Before they moved, he spoke to them. He always prepared them, even when they couldn't understand the preparation. Together they prayed, and heaven listened, as it always did when he spoke. A new morning, and he walked back toward the city, back toward his purpose. The donkey was back home, fed and rested. It had carried a king, and now the king had moved on. Jerusalem woke to a quieter morning, but something had shifted in the city's soul, and everyone could feel it. He returned to the temple and he taught, because every day was a gift he intended to use. Even those who had come to challenge him found themselves unable to argue back. They came to him with their best traps, their cleverest questions, their most political dilemmas. He answered every one perfectly, every time, and they had nothing left to say. The crowd had watched, and they understood what had just happened, even if the Pharisees refused to. As the sun dipped low, he looked over the city one more time. He always loved Jerusalem, even when Jerusalem couldn't love him back. He walked into the sunset, not as a man defeated, but as a king who knew exactly what came next. The triumphal entry was complete, but the story had only just begun.